Snow, I think, increasingly...
Well, that's what's through the papers this morning with theologian Vicky Beeching and eco-engineer Dick Strawbridge. Morning once again. Vicky, we'll start with the Mail on Sunday, should we? And this, hugely disturbing case that we've had, or story that's emerged in the last week or so.
Yeah, absolutely tragic. So there's this lady who's 48 and she was abused as a child, which was incredibly damaging. And we were hearing about what the trial was actually like for her and how the barrister basically bullied her using phrases like liar and fantasist and pushed her to the point where she really felt more like the victim of the trial than you know, the actual people who committed the crimes. And it resulted in her suicide, which is terrible, and it's really bringing to the fore questions about vulnerable witnesses. How do we protect witnesses who are very vulnerable from being in these situations where they're really, really damaged? And it reminds me a bit of the Dowler situation, you know, the Dowler parents saying they actually felt like they were the ones who were on trial. So how do we protect these people who have to stand as witnesses, but it's just such a harrowing experience?
Well, I was going to say, very difficult question, because from what I was reading, she was asked throughout, does she want to go ahead with giving evidence, and insisted that that's what she wanted to do. But how prepared was she, as you
I know,
say?
but I think for many victims, that feels like part of their catharsis, their moment to actually say, this happened to me, and I want this person to be brought to account. But I think sometimes the way it's handled, the cost of that, even though it is cathartic, they wouldn't not want to be there, I guess, because they want to bring the perpetrator to justice, but the damage it does, especially in this case.
Years, for over 30 years she lived with this, and in the end it was proven, you know, they were guilty, and she was, you know, everything that had to happen in court happened, but what an ordeal. It's just a very, very sad story.
You do have to have a robust defence, don't you?
Absolutely.
Because otherwise people who are falsely accused wouldn't have any recall. Which is...
That is true.
Undoubtedly. But again, when it comes to something like, you know, there's no statute of limitation on this. We're talking 30 years ago, and obviously over 30 years this has been eating away. And I think you have to be robust, but then again, that's what the judge is there for. He's there to try and, I think, make it fair on both sides, to make sure that there is proof and it is done. But, you know, this is a tragedy, obviously.
Yeah.
But,
it seems like maybe there's lines of appropriateness too. You could really grill someone on whether they're telling the truth, but actually accusing them of being a liar and a fantasist and making it all up because they want it all to centre on them. Those kind of charges, I think, may be going a step too far. I mean, that's not really just pulling apart somebody's story as false. I don't know. I just think when people are vulnerable, especially when it comes to, I guess, crimes against women of a sexual nature, it just feels like they're dealing with so much pain.
It is a hugely difficult issue. Another difficult issue, actually, still in the Mail on Sunday, Dick. Looking at 3,000 too many, but looking at, concerns, and we've seen it raised because of Mid-Staffordshire Hospital, but obviously concerns within the NHS about how people are treated.
OK, Stafford, the Mid-Staffs, and everybody's aware of that, and there's no way you can justify some of the behaviour. And it's interesting because you've got Professor Lord Winston making a comment about indifference being the key issue with the NHS. And the NHS is so special, it's so important for us. But we seem to have lost the compassion that was in there as well. The matron being in charge, people becoming nurses because they wanted to care for people, to look after them. Now they have to get their degrees. Now the training is all geared towards performance as opposed to that sort of caring side of life. And it's, you know, I'm not saying the answer is to bring back matron, that's too simple, but there is something somewhere along the line where people have to get back to care being the most important thing in our hospitals, as opposed to the fact
targets.
that... but hugely important in the NHS, massive amount of our money goes into it, but how do we get people to care? Because if you look at the number of above average deaths in all these various trusts, it's a very scary concept. However, people know about it. We just don't have the regime in place that allows people to change it and to fix it. And that, to me, is the saddest bit. We do need people to sort of say, right, number one, let's get the care out. By the way, it doesn't mean you get more money. It's not an excuse to give people more money to spend on the NHS. We have to put, front and foremost, right there, we have to be looking at people's care.
Well, of course, there will be, obviously, the changes afoot as a result of the report we had last week. It's going to be interesting to see how that develops over the coming months. Stay with us. Lots more still to come in just a moment, including the secret to everlasting love. That's one worth waiting for. And at last, the coming gnome.
Leaving better.
So let's look through the papers once more with Dick and with Vicky. Let's talk about this fella. There you go. At last, the Chelsea Flower Show is allowing gnomes in on the gardens. Vicky.
Absolutely fantastic story. So it's the 100th anniversary of the Chelsea Flower Show, and they're allowing gnomes because they've been under pressure from those who'd wanted them there for many years, and actually because there's been several cases of gnome smuggling, which I thought was hilarious. People actually bringing their gnomes in. Some of them apparently are the lucky mascots of gardeners who can't possibly want to be there without their little friend to help them. And there's been complaints saying we have plastic windmills, they're allowed, but gnomes have been banned apparently by snobby people who think they are tacky. So they apparently won't only be allowed this year, they will be celebrated.
Celebrate. What do you reckon, Dick?
I think it's quite interesting because I think it's time to get shares in gnome manufacturing. If it's at Chelsea, it's going to be everywhere. But we've also got, something in the article that I thought was quite good. It's, you know, it's nearly 150 years ago that the first gnomes came to Britain from Germany. Now, the fact that people...
I didn't realise they were German.
We're talking about 150 years of gnomes being around the place. And of course, in those days, it was slightly different because they're earthenware figurines. So it's slightly different. But
I think they went down in the world when they started manufacturing them in plastic. That's what the Chelsea Flower Show did.
I have to say, this little fella is...
it's quite cute, isn't
It's quite a sort of...
Have you got
realistic?
one?
I haven't got a gnome, actually.
No, but this says something, doesn't it, really? Because you can say he's quite cute, but for me, it's a no thank you.
Yes.
You know.
Yeah. No, I have to say, I wouldn't have one in my own garden.
But the original reason for not having him is that they thought, Chelsea Flower Show in particular, thought they detracted from the gardens and the
If they called them
displays.
earthenware figurines, I think they would have added more. It sounds more Chelsea, doesn't it?
Still gnomes.
I do love your earthenware figurine.
Yeah.
A little fat man with a fishing
bit
rod.
classy, but if you want a gnome, get one, why not? This is an interesting one. In it's The Independent on Sunday. This lady, we don't particularly know her, but she's a close ally of Angela Merkel, and apparently...
Education Minister had to resign, and that's because she's been accused of plagiarising her PhD 30 years ago. Now, there's two elements to this. The first thing, obviously in Germany, people use their academic titles. So she'll be Frau Doctor, and they're very proud of the work that goes into that. But she has said she didn't plagiarise. Come forward to today, and people doing research for PhDs, it's on the internet. It seems to me to be an awful lot of exactly that, taking the information off. I don't know if there's any original thought anymore, but it's the academic excellence that is actually being questioned here. I think it's a major issue because, you know, we assume if somebody's done the study, they know the subject area. And
It's totally true. I'm actually in the middle of a PhD right now, and that is a huge issue, and we're talked to constantly about it, that you can actually take things from the internet accidentally. And I think documents now are scanned just for similarities to anything online, especially things like Wikipedia. Because it's actually quite simple now, isn't it? You know, you thought you had the thought, or maybe you thought you reworded it, and in the end you reworded it so that it was too close. It's a big thing for PhD students these days.
I have to say, it's not anything I have to worry about. Because I'm nowhere near clever enough for a PhD. I only wish I was. My brother could have had a PhD. But let's talk about love, because I like a bit of love. And it's all...
Don't we all?
God. Let's... but it's all down to the brain.
It is indeed. So findings have been published in a neuroscience journal talking about the way our brains light up and the patterns of electrical energy that take place in our brains when we look at images of the person that we are in a relationship with. And they are saying that they might be able to predict whether your relationship will last. So things that you're not even sure of yourself, they might be able to say, based on our findings, we can tell you whether you'll still be with so-and-so in 3 years. So
that has to be tested. And when you're in love, you're not going to listen to a scientist, are you?
It's interesting findings, though, because they are
it's wrong.
testing so many
Where's the soul in this? You've got a little smudge on your brain pattern there, and therefore you might as well give up now.
It does seem quite reductionist, it does, doesn't it?
You know, I think life's too short to listen to that. But...
Oh, I don't know. A bit of science, so you can't argue with that. And if that little bit of your brain has to go blue, then...
Who knows?
Oh, what a good I say. I might go and get mine checked out. Thank you. It's been good to see you. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
Let's see what Charlie's got for us this morning.